Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. Every week, it's you and me locked in a room until you're done listening to our story. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. The password for the key code to get out of the room will be revealed at the end of this episode. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Yeah, doing all right.
That's great. What story elements did you guys have?
I have beginning scene.
As prophecy.
Okay. I have magic system. So, Reed, do you want to go first?
Well, beginning scene strikes me as a good place to go. There's just a nip of autumn in the air, and it's the they call them velvet leaves. It's a tree that keeps green all year round, and they've got these boughs that kind of a straight trunk, very tall, and the boughs of the trees kind of slope downward, and they kind of there's a brook that is kind of chattering among the stones coming out from this grove of these velvet leaf trees. And Raymond has his he has a campfire going there, and he's got an iron pan, got it hot, fixing to toss in a fish that was alive just moments ago. And he had been fishing in the pool that forms at the base of a kind of a falls. It's only of about 20 feet. As it comes off kind of an escarpment, the brook splashes down into this pool, and then it continues kind of rolling over some rocks and some rapids and stuff down through the forest and into a beautiful valley, and flows into a river that flows along the basis of the valley. The valley is about a mile wide, and it's mostly meadow grass, but there's copses of trees all kind of throughout it. But up here in the forest, up among the rocks, it's kind of the foothills of a mountainous area, and the brook comes out of a lake kind of on a level above. And he's really delighted with this fish that he caught, because normally the fish he catches in this part of the brook are a smaller kind of a trout-like fish, and the fish that he's fixing to have for supper is generally found just up in the lake. So the only thing he can figure, this one must have made its way over the falls, and he's having it for supper. But he's pretty satisfied with himself. The air is a little chilly. It's turning fall, and he has got a good start on the foundation of a house. He has staked out for himself a claim. He is, I guess one would call him a pioneer. He is hoping to bring a woman out with him and some animals and raise a family, and he has spent the summer kind of getting the farmstead, getting the homestead ready.
Right.
He's got a cabin that he's living in, and he lived in it the last winter, and it was fairly harsh, but the sun filtering through the trees, and here evening coming on, and the call of birds. Forest here is plentiful with game. He'll have no neighbors for miles. This part is very sparsely settled, and with the government's incentives for encouraging people to settle, bring civilization to this wilderness area, all he's got to do is build a home and do some sustainable farming for a period of years, and then the homestead claim will be his. And he's just really pleased with what he's gotten done, and he's pretty sure he's going to be able to get out of the mountains and make his way back to family and the people that he left behind, and marry the girl that he hopes is waiting for him, and he's got the smoke from the campfire. It's a kind of an idyllic situation. This place he's thrived. He's had to rough it because he just came with nothing and just built a campsite first, and now he's like I say, he's hauled stone, and he has got the foundation laid for a house, a pretty sizable house, a place where he can raise a bunch of kids. He's got a shed built that he's laid in firewood, and he's excited because the inheritance that he is going to receive will probably afford him some of the newfangled machinery that people are. There's been kind of an explosion of technology and tools that are going to make farming, much more possible in a way that wouldn't have been just a few years before. So this is sitting by the campfire, and that's the opening scene.
That's great. That's going to work so well, Reed. You have no idea. Seth, do you want to go next, or should I go next with the magic system?
Go ahead with the magic system.
So I have magic system, but I also have a couple of world building items, so we can rectify those as we go along. So what happens? how the magic system works is this. A mother, when a mom and a dad love each other very much, they have a child, right? And depending on the mother's predisposition for this magic system and the father's predisposition for this magic system, it will manifest in the child. And how it manifests is while the child is in utero, while they're being developed in their mother, they, depending on what the mother is exposed to, that's stresses, that's foods, smells, sights, sounds, geographic locations, it passes on from basically what they discovered is that in the people who have this magic system in sort of the center of their brain, like where the what's it called? The eye of Horus inside your brain.
The pineal gland.
Yeah, inside the pineal gland, there grows it looks like a pearl, right? And it starts to grow at conception. Like the ability to make it happens when the baby begins to develop. And it's fully grown when the baby is developed, when the baby is delivered. So 9 months technically, because most pregnancies are 9 months, but it can be a little bit premature and it's fine. It can be a little bit late and it's fine. And what happens is through the years, as they've sort of discovered this and have been testing it, it all depends on what the mother was exposed to, right? So like in some instances, if she traveled a lot, you might get a teleporter who has a strong affinity to move things between the different cities or locations where she traveled, right? If she was a farmer, then she might get you might get out of it a person who can directly influence crops and, tell the weather and different things like that. Sailors, if she was a sailor or if she was on a ship a lot or owned a shipping company or, worked with and by the sea, you might get much finer control. And the thing is that this stacks, right? So if her parents were sailors and she had an affinity for the sea, then this next one would have a heavy ability to influence the sea, depending on who her father was. And just like because your father and mother are unique in mind and body chemistry, you are unique in mind and body chemistry. There's a lot of sames people who have the same kind of thing, but everyone's power sort of manifests a little bit differently because it's built off of this chemistry of union, basically. And this has led to a couple of things. It's led to incredibly rigid dietary situational instructions for women when they're pregnant, right? Oh, you got to get there's the sort of sensationalists. Only eat fresh ginger when you're pregnant for the first 6 months. The baby will be able to run twice as fast as a normal person, or don't do this or do this. And so oftentimes women, when they are going to get married, they will bring with them their retinue, right? Their resume of like, this is what I was trained under. These are the foods that I was trained under that were consumed upon and men will do this too. And a lot of times women will require that of men to make sure that their bloodlines are going to mix correctly and form the kind of child that could like push them up into the next, because getting accepted into these schools, being able to have a person who can think faster than a normal person, kind of like a Mentat or like Dune or like a person computer who can like calculate things. That's really important. A guy who can just look at something and know how long it is exactly because his father worked his entire life at a sawmill, or built houses his entire life.
Like musical talent and physical conditioning.
Yeah.
And all of that.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
And this has led to a couple of kind of twisted and kind of terrible things in the past, like mills, like farms for humans to create, these are evil countries that have done this, but like farms to create the specific type of human being that people want, The problem with things like that is it's always degenerative. As each generation lives under worse and worse conditions, the quality of person that comes out of it and their abilities, they're not any less human, but their abilities end up being very chaotic, end up being very disastrous,
Oh, man.
And
yeah.
that was like, wars were fought over that like 100 years ago. And like, rules about humanity and humans and things like that were put into place. But as evil does, evil tends to always creep back. And that's part of the theme of this story is evil has crept back into the place of, hey, we will give you a certain amount of money to follow our rigid system throughout your childbearing, your 9 months, and then we will purchase the child from you.
Yikes.
Right. And there's lots of controversy in the world if that's like allowed, if that's legal, if that should be allowed to happen or not.
Does the magic only manifest in females, or does it
No,
manifest in
no.
males too?
Male and females, but it's the reason why the emphasis is on females because it's that development stage. The male portion of conception does matter. How he was raised and how he developed does matter, but it tends to follow a matriarchal order because she is the one who actually developed the human being.
Right.
You know,
So
it's like a 3/4. It's 3/4 her and 1/4 him sort of system. At least that's how it's presented. Our hero or one of the main characters is an investigator whose dad was a biologist, sort of human anatomy kind of person, a scientist. So he has a great eye for detail, and his mother was sort of a freer thinking, kind of a hippie, sort of brought this kind of stuffy guy out of his shell, showed him like the flowers, and he would recite the kind of flowers, and she would make flower necklaces for him, stuff like that. So he has this like great appreciation for life, but he was born before the time that we live in now. So he was born in sort of the age before. So he was like 2 generations past what normal generations. So I don't know how old that would put him. The 40s, maybe. He's like 40 years old. But he is an investigator, kind of like a private eye, helping people find things. And he's been seeing a lot of sort of shifts in how people operate. His powers especially are, he can like look down. He can like, I don't want to say zoom in, but he can observe things. And the more he observes things, the deeper he can see into them, right? Which allows him to like analyze writing styles and stuff really easily. He's a friend of the trees. That was like a subset of this whole culture, came out of sort of the Southwest, that were like the friend of the trees, and like all the men and all the women were like not hippies, but they were kind of more earthy people, and that kind of infused into the cities, which then sort of brought life back. And so, while sort of an industrial revolution has been starting, there's a lot of like trees, and almost everyone can sort of nurture trees just fine. Like they can, just by being around trees, they can help trees grow. And so like the cities are much greener than they typically would be because of this infusion of the people of the trees. But what he's been noticing, and sort of I want to say what I think is sort of the crux of the issue here, is that the population, we're under a replacement population right now. So not enough kids are being born to replace the population that's dying. So we're not in a population boom. And some people say it's this, some people say it's that. Some people say it's the education. We've taught women and men not to get married until they're sure that they can pay for all the right situations, you can visit every city, till you can eat just the finest foods, all that kind of emphasis that's being put on people. It's like it's an emphasis into specialization and an emphasis away from generalization, if that makes sense, which then causes people to get scared and not want to have kids yet until everything is perfect. So that's been kind of plaguing. And then the thing that's plaguing him is that he's been investigating a rash of murders where the people have been killed, and then the pearl has been removed from their head. And it's like, what are they going to do with it? Can they, there's like people of old used to like kill the sorcerer and crush up the pearl and drink it in tea, and it like gave you magical powers or brought back youth, or like there's all these rumors about what they're doing with it, but that's kind of the rash of what's happening while the world is kind of booming in technology. And there's like a conflicting force. There's like all the universities of sort of these magical people who emphasize the magical, and then there's all these other universities that are pushing technology, and they're starting to kind of encroach on each other a little bit. So what's happening is new frontiers are finally being opened up. A continent was just discovered. People are starting to pioneer out, like in Reed's beginning scene, and things are, it's like, well, if you don't like the city and you don't like the smog, then go to the country. It's like, so there's just a lot of different conflicts that are happening around this power as it develops, this stagnation. What was his name? Harold?
Raymond.
Raymond is kind of like he's seen as kind of like a weirdo. Like, why would you leave the city? Why would you leave the city where things are together and we're booming? And it's like, he has his own reasons. But anyways, that's the magic system and a little bit of the history and maybe some of the conflicts. That's kind of it was kind of all wrapped up together. But yeah, I don't know who the hero is going to be, whether it's this investigator guy, whether it's someone else, but those are the things that are happening.
Cool.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that. That's a real interesting framework for a story.
Yeah.
Okay, so the prophecy isn't necessarily like one line of prophecy or like some kind of thing, but I think with you explaining that's why I wanted you to explain some of that first, because I had kind of like a couple things, and I think it'll meld with what you just said.
Yeah.
So instead of being like some blatant prophecy, like, the one who pulls the sword from the stone will become the king of all the land or something like that.
That's a pretty good prophecy, but
Yeah, I mean, but what the prophecy thing is, because I didn't want to, because I knew you had magic system, and the only couple things I was coming up with were straying in that direction, and I didn't want to then
yeah, no, I hear
shape
you.
it in a way that wouldn't fit, and I think it'll fit well. And what it is my initial thought is that it has nothing to do with any of these people that have the affinity to magic. In matter of fact, and then you can, knowing what you have in mind for the magic system, this is what I'll say with it, is they've tried to breed this into different magic lines, but always find that, it has no bearing on, let's say, so I jumped ahead of myself a little bit. It's like a whole different class that has an affinity to prophesy.
Okay.
Be it, and again, it has like a couple different sides to it. One side of it is that maybe just about anybody could, given, let's say the proper like attention to it, but not as strongly. And what I mean by that is it'd be like the on the more lighter scale, if you cut a piece of your hair off and I held on to it, right, and I'd focus and I'd make it kind of a part, not like a part of me, like I, soldered it onto my arm or anything, but like wore it as like an amulet and like held it and focused on it.
Yeah.
I could start getting glimpses of things, be it, things that you might be thinking about, or something that might happen to you the next day, in light bursts,
Right.
but some of that is, faulty to the point that, it'd be very specific, to the item or items that you're, I guess you say, holding on to.
Okay.
Like if someone held on to like a chunk of gold, and, over like 30 years of focusing on the gold, then they could then like have a more affinity to like see where there might be a vein or look forward to where gold might be found.
Okay.
But again, it
That's
would
kinda
take a long time to like focus on that. Right. Or like if someone held on to like some apple seeds or like, a dried up piece of apple with, apple wood, they could predict, this year's apple crop will be good. There's, going to be a bug that's going to be coming against, we need to do heavy pruning this year, next year. Right. And so there can be some of that, like that would be like a lower class that, I would say most anyone could do, but no one really would take the time to do it unless it was particularly profitable. And being that, there's plenty of other things to do.
Right.
Not instilled too often, unless it's like a grandfather that like keeps a lock of each of his grandkids' hair so that he can kind of like keep an eye on them and in his old age kind of like give them bits of wisdom or something like that he sees might be going on.
Right.
But then the other side of it then would be where it would manifest, where then just, an individual that would be in an area, breathing the air, being around it, could more quickly pick up on, broader things, just by breathing the air, being around the different things in an area, and kind of see, I guess, more of a prophetic goings on.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And where it would be something that would be like, oh, this is like really powerful. We've got this guy that can kind of like, predict traffic and, all this other stuff, knows, just like intuitively knows when to stop, when to go somewhere, who's coming around each corner. Like it just has like a sixth sense kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes manifesting in like, a vision where, they'll brush against someone and then be like, they're going to be hit by a bus, next Thursday. And so then it'd be like, don't go to the this corner on that day or whatever, like it's your demise, or like I don't like can see into different things
Right.
that kind of puts it in doom and gloom, but are more affinitive to it. And I would say with what you had with the magic system, that would obviously be something that someone would be like, oh, that would be something I'd want to put in the magic repertoire.
Right.
But then never seems it's not necessarily something that's passed on from father to son or mother to son or daughter or whatever it is. It just seems to be something that pops up more affinitively on a random scale.
I have this idea as you're talking about this that I think would be really cool. You guys should hear me out and then let me know if this sounds okay. So, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, there were 3 families, right? Great, powerful families, clan leaders, warriors, and each of them, in their own way, in their own cities, in their own areas, they were turning into kingdoms at this point. Each of them basically were given a task by the deity to achieve something, right? In order to get their place, join the god, get eternal life, whatever the reason, some kind of great game, basically like a great game. And each of them sort of were given a task, right? And one went and devised over like 100 years, like they were given this great task, like build this great thing, a pyramid, a giant Stonehenge, or basically like connect with me. It was what the god said. Like, here's my messenger. He wants so connect with me. That's your task. And each of them attained connection in a different way, right? This is time out of mind. There's barely books that even speculate that this is how this started. One family, clan, country put all of their efforts into technology, right? Into creating precision detection units, telescopes, smoke signals, typewriters, telegram, and they were like reaching this place that they were sending signals out into space, radio signals, and that's what they were doing, right? And the other one sought to predict when this messenger would come back. So they heavily emphasized and taught about prophecy, basically. And the other one worked towards the betterment of themselves, so that with every new generation, they would be able to, maybe when this messenger came, show themselves worthy of being able to join the courts of this god, right? And so here you have, it's not hundreds of years, it has to be thousands of years. Thousands of years later, you have 3 distinct factions who have worked a lot internally and have forgotten the plot, right? You have these people of the prophecy, you have these people of the magic, and then you have the technology, right? And the prophecy has risen up and ruled most of the world for a couple hundred years, and then the magic, and then the technology, and we're on a swing now where the prophecy people are starting to wane, the technology is starting to boom, and the magic guys are starting to sort of make their kind of comeuppance, and the end result is this messenger from the god said, like, when you're worthy, you can, talk to us, come to us, we want you to join with us. And that was the emphasis at first, but as sort of time wore on, it's kind of fallen, they've lost the plot, basically. And so the story needs to be of a person and I think like the tree people that I was mentioning, they're kind of more the prophecy people, right? And then this investigator, this investigator guy's dad, he was kind of more of the technology or the magic people. And then there's, and so there's not, that's why there's not a lot of cross-pollination, because for so long they sort of emphasized only on themselves. That's why you can't take a prophecy thing and mix it with a magic thing, because the messengers were like, no, these are 3 separate, the messengers or the god, whoever's ever watching this is like, these are 3 distinct. You can't have all 3. It can't be one person who has all 3. So I think in this story, we're going to have 3 heroes.
Oh, cool.
Right? One from each group who manifests some certain thing in order to fulfill this task given thousands of years ago that is now forgotten or partially forgotten. The prophecy people would definitely probably be much better at writing things down and much more inclined to keep records. So maybe they have some inkling of what needs to happen, And the technology people everything is new. So for them, it's really difficult to explain to them because they want to understand things on the material world. And I imagine the magic people are much more aristocratic because it's much more structured in how they think about things, bloodlines and stuff like that. And so it's kind of difficult it's like a hillbilly, a French aristocrat, and an industrial tycoon coming together and trying to agree on something. What do you think of that, Seth? Did I ruin your thing?
No, I think that works good.
Great.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. So how did do we have kingdoms, nation states? Are there like 3 kind of world powers? How is this developing?
Yeah, I would say maybe we have 3 different styles. Maybe we have sort of a corporate, sort of government system in the technology, kind of industrial revolution era people, right?
Their institutions of higher learning will be stressing knowledge of science and the world and metallurgy and
And the system, the magic pearl people, they would just use obviously aristocratic hierarchies based on bloodlines, like who has manifested this at this person time, therefore they're kind of like the Aes Sedai, when this is a Wheel of Time reference. Pause the podcast, go listen to 14 books, and then come back and you'll understand what I'm talking about. When 2 magic wielders sort of enter the room, they kind of sense each other's ability, and then whoever has the greater ability, the other one is deferential to them.
Right.
So I imagine that same sort of thing can happen. 2 sort of magic users pearl magic users come into a room, and they look at each other, and immediately there's not a battle of wills, but there's just kind of like a handshake of wills. And whoever's handshake is stronger, the other one just kind of bows down. And so with that, you kind of have the most powerful rising to the top, and then it trickling down from there. I don't know about the prophecy people.
That's kind of cool.
Maybe
I think
a pure democracy.
I would say, just looking at kind of Reed's original scene with like this expansion out into this like new world, I'm thinking that the image that comes to mind would be like this old world, almost like Europe, where you have lots of different like kingdoms and duchies and stuff like that, and each one kind of has a higher power structure of one of these other, ideological groups, right? So you have a really aristocratic, a king, a monarch. He's the most powerful, and he's got all his, I hate to say knights, but I don't know what technology level we want to, kind of set this at. And they hold power because they are powerful. They don't necessarily need all the technology just because they're, abilities. Not that they don't use like the, nicer technological ships, but then they use them through their own terms, where then the other ones have like a rigid and hard, everything's technology, the cog and wheel, and the most efficient way to run a machine. And I'm thinking of like German engineering or something like that, where like the ability to like run like efficient machinery comes to play. But then you have the prophetic kind of group, almost like finding its way into the more tribal or kind of, I guess, maybe stoic or separated out sects
like
or groups of people. Yeah. So like they're kind of mixed in, but with never really like a full powerhouse. And maybe you have like one place, like, I don't know, like a Holy Roman Empire or something, where like its leader is like this great prophet and and has kind of like these prophets. And so not like, and has influence inside of these other countries, right? And might have like a power source. And then you have this new land that has come up that's kind of become this like mixing pot where like no one is really the higher or under. They're all just like these different collectives of people that have come here for a new start, breaking out of the old way of doing things, to find new lands, new possibility.
You could even make it something like the new land has only been discovered for the past like 50 years, right? And you can't teleport there with the magic pearl system. You can only, if you're there, you can prophesy about things that are there, but when you're not there, you have no access to kind of step the void. And then the technology hasn't been able to seat itself and build the factories and the infrastructure it needs to. So it's kind of, everyone's been kind of forced to rely on each other, because for the last 100 years, you just teleport the coal from the mines to the factories and they
Right.
pay you. But if
Yeah.
you can't teleport all the materials thousands of miles across the ocean, you have to go there and then you have to dig. And
Yeah, I guess I was picturing kind of like maybe an 18th century kind of beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but enhanced by these magical abilities. So it's
right.
it isn't an actual, it's not exactly analogous to, like, say, the pioneer period in our world, where the new world was being settled, and the Industrial Revolution would obviously, take a different shape, where you had these magical abilities.
Well, okay, so imagine this, Reed. Imagine if the America was never colonized because we never developed sails, because we always had people who could just push the boat forward.
Oh, cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So we never needed to develop sails. So they push the boat forward, but then halfway across the ocean, they lose the ability to.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
It stops working. And so it's like, well, write that off. And so it's only now through certain, finally they finally created, a guy was born and raised, and he was finally strong enough to wind the giant spring that could propel this boat 10,000 miles. Or
Okay.
they finally perfected the steam engine or something, right? So they were finally able to break that barrier. Because you think about it, like, if sails didn't work, when would we have made it over to America?
Yeah.
If we never needed sails, but whatever we used for propulsion before that, people rowing, it's like, that's a barren wasteland. You're telling me the only way we can get there is by having people row, And now finally, because of this revolution, because this industrial revolution, it's ticked up enough where enough things have happened that we can just barely get there. And so now you get there and everything is new, because part of the thing is that the magic pearl system is based on association, where you were. So the power is really powerful in this other continent, this Europe area, because there's a lot of association there, because your grandma, her grandma, her grandma, her grandma, her grandma, all the way back for thousands of years lived in this city. So you're really powerful here. But like, we've just now had 2 generations in this new continent who are just now starting to kind of get a little bit of a grasp. The factories are just starting to go up. And so it's still, it's not full colonial era. It is industrial revolution, but it's imagine if we just didn't need to. Like, I read this book called what is it called? The Galaxy Mage? I don't remember. But anyways, he was a wizard. His whole planet was magic, and he slept on a straw bed. And this girl from Earth was there, and she was like, "Why do you sleep on a straw bed?" And he's like, "Because it's enchanted with restfulness, it's enchanted with sleep. Why do I need to sleep on anything else? I just lay down and I just fall asleep and I wake up fully refreshed." It's like he never needed to develop anything else because he had magic, So there's going to be like these pitfalls in this new world versus in the old world.
Sign up for the Comfort Rest adjustable bed.
Yeah, no, exactly. Anyways, I think that's enough for today. We definitely did a lot more than we typically have, which I'm really liking. 2 more episodes to do a lot more. Yeah, I think we'll call it a day for today and then come back next week with more on this, what's turning out to be pretty interesting story. Ladies and gentlemen, the code is 1990. Thanks so much for joining us here. My name has been Levi, and this has been Wait It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. If you want to hear from us, if you want to talk to us, if you want to tell us about how great this story was, send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you don't ever want to hear from us again, send us a message on X or Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you want to tell us about how all our stories are unoriginal, and how we never create anything interesting, and maybe we ought to make a tiger the king, I would say, just wait, it gets better.